Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mind Blown Zone, episode 49. This one is called Who Really Rules the World? Here with Brad. How you doing, Brad?
Believe it or not, never better yet again. How about yourself?
Never better, mate. Today's the day. Best day ever.
It is indeed. It is indeed. This is a doozy we got cooking here today. What's going on?
I got a really cool intro script. Ready to hear it?
Let her rip.
All right. What if everything you think you understand about world events, from Ukraine to Israel, from Trump to Putin, is nothing more than political theater designed to keep you distracted whilst the real puppet masters remain completely invisible? Today we're going to shatter the illusion that nations actually control their own destinies. We'll expose the tiny group of entities that have orchestrated every major conflict, crisis, and culture shift for centuries. Entities so skilled at manipulation that they've convinced even the most independent thinkers in alternative media to play their game. This isn't about left versus right, east versus west, or any other tribal division you've been conditioned to believe matters. This is about recognizing a truth that has never been presented to you, but once you hear it, you'll make sense of everything.
I love it. Brilliant.
Like what you hear?
Let's see if we're up to the task. I love it. It's a great intro.
Okay.
Well done.
Well, let's dive into the first of 5 key topics that we're going to explore. Here it is. The first one: breaking the warring nations spell. Now, there's a model that everybody believes, basically about how the world works. We've dubbed this the warring nations spell. Do you want to give us the general outline of this, Brad?
Well, sure. I mean, it's what we all have been conditioned to believe, and of course there are these just different cliques or nations or tribes, and they form together, and they whether they fight over religion or resources or territory or land or power, and those eventually form what we call countries or nations today. And between us, there's always some level of friction that eventually leads to gigantic wars and bloodshed. Into perpetuity. It's been going on for millennia, and there seems to be no end in sight. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wrote down that it's kind of like this game I used to play called Civilization, where you kind of like choose your civilization and you're the leader, and there's other leaders of civilizations. And you got like economics, territory, religion, culture, space, military, and you compete, right? So you make the choices as the leader. There's no one else behind the scenes or anything like that. It's just nation versus nation. The leader of the nation is the leader of the nation. That's it. They're the one to blame, the one upon whom the responsibility rests.
That's right. And that's what we've been conditioned to believe. And I think what we're proposing here today is that hopefully everybody's heard the story about how if you put black ants and red ants in a jar, right? They won't fight with each other. They won't attack each other. They'll kind of mind their own business and do their own thing. But if you pick the jar up and shake it, real violently, then they'll all blame the opposing race, if you will, and they'll fight to the death. Yeah?
Yeah, I've definitely heard
They're
that one.
unaware. Yeah, they're unaware of the hand outside on the jar that's doing the shaking then, so they blame each other.
Yeah, with the ants, you don't even need to hide the hand. You can just put your hand right there on the jar. They don't even see it, and right out in the open.
Thus, it's a hidden hand, in effect, right? And so, the black ants know they didn't cause all the commotion, and the red ants know they didn't cause all the commotion, but they assume that the other colored ant was the one who caused all the violence, and so they fight each other to the death.
So basically, every media outlet out there, major outlet like Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens or anything like Fox or CNN or anything like that, doesn't matter right or left, they all analyze what happens in the world through this lens. Right? So if something bad happens, is it Trump's fault, or is it Putin's fault, or is it Netanyahu's fault, or is it Hamas's fault? Like which leader of the country made the wrong choice that resulted in this mess that we're in? And it's
That's right.
just 100% analysis through this warring nations model.
That's right. Or terrorist model, right?
Hmm.
That's exactly right. And what we're trying to propose is that no, there's a hand shaking the jar that remains hidden and out of sight, and we're hoping to expose it here today.
Yeah. We point out that these, like, questions that are going on in the world, like, all these discussion, like, is NATO or Putin to blame for what's going on in Ukraine, and who's done right or wrong there? Or is it Hamas, or is it Israel, or, is it Trump, or is it Kamala? Like, you know, every single thing that, gets presented to us on the media, we've said that these are red herrings, right? And we acutely define that as something that misleads or distracts from a relevant or important question. So we're trying to figure out, everyone's trying to figure out what's going on and what should we do based on 100 different red herrings.
Exactly.
Sound right to you, Brad?
Well put. That's perfect. Very well put.
Okay, so I think that kind of introduces the topic. How about we go on to some evidence about world controllers in that case?
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Okay, so we have recent evidence of world controllers. We got a good few examples here. We got the war in Ukraine. We got the WMDs in Iraq, and we can touch on COVID. As soon as that one's talked to death about, we can just touch on that at the end. But why don't you start us off with the whole NATO Putin Ukraine thing,
Right.
Brad?
Well, this one's really simple, and it's just a matter of really media suppression or journalistic ignorance, whatever you want to call it. But everybody who has studied the rise and fall of Ukraine knows that for over 20 years now, really Putin has been saying that there's no way that the NATO countries put nukes on their border, which is a perfectly logical thing to do. And it was the Minsk agreements, and he and Lavrov have been saying it for decades that if you do that, you're going to start a war. So there's like zero mystery in it, and there's every reason that you have to completely sympathize with that attitude. I mean, when the Soviet Union allegedly tried to put nukes in Cuba back in the 1960s, right here in America, I mean, that was like a massive, huge international event. And there's no way we're going to let our alleged enemy put nukes right next to us. And it's the same thing for Putin. So it's perfectly rational that NATO knew, the United States knew that if we tried to bring Ukraine into NATO, that was going to start a war. They knew that would happen. There was no mystery about it, right?
Right.
But how many
that was pretty
Americans?
clear.
How many Americans or Australians on the street know this fact? The answer is almost none. Only ones that do actual research and don't just blindly trust the media, right?
Yeah, and it's not inaccessible. Like, if you go and listen to Putin speak in Russian with a translation in subtitles, you will hear him say that. So it's available, but it's not served up to people on the broadcasted media outlet channels.
Right. And even the alternative media pundits tend to brush over it rather quickly. Not all of them, but quite a few of them give that a minor detail. Or there's just quickly too, there's the color revolution that the CIA and George Soros funded in 2014. We overthrew the acting president and brought in Zelensky, right? And and made it appear to be democratic, but it was just a giant coup. Same thing we've done in numerous South American countries. We did it with the Shah in Iran back in the 1950s. It's been done dozens of times. And the same thing was done in Ukraine in 2014. And just a little tiny bit of research will show you that's exactly what happened. And what we have now is this puppet leader, right? Former cross-dressing musician, Zelensky, now in the Ukraine. And he's just doing the bidding of powers outside of any Ukrainian interests. Nothing that's happened in Ukraine for these past 4 years has even been even remotely in the interests of the Ukrainian people. But it's sold to us in the West like Russia, bad guy, evil bear, attacking small, weak opponent for nefarious purposes. That's what the story we're told.
Right. And I think the reason we say this is evidence of world controllers is that if you just had if you actually had leaders of countries acting in everybody's best interests, well, NATO would be like, well, Putin said that there'll be a war if, we encroach with nukes, so we'd better not even touch anything like that, right? It would just never happen, or you get a war. Like, who would want a war? No one, right? You just wouldn't.
Exactly.
And not only that, also, everyone would know what happened. Like, the news outlets in America would report that Putin said that, and it would all be clear. But it's not like that. So that raises the question, like, why isn't it like that? What's going on here? Why would NATO act like this when it's pretty obvious that could trigger a war? And who wants a war? And all that's really happened out of this is that Ukraine has turned into a battleground and the whole country's been torn apart, right? So that could have all been avoided just by remaining peaceful.
It's an insane decision, right? Even a remotely sane leader would say, we don't stand a chance against Russia, so we better not antagonize them, right? That's very simple. It takes 5 seconds to figure that one out.
Right. So we say this is evidence, not proof. It's not like here's a picture of a world controller. It's like the way that this model works just doesn't add up at all. Do you reckon that's fair in how we're presenting it, Brad?
Well, yeah, and so it's important to note that, right, so that the world controllers don't have to manipulate both sides at the same time always, right? They just need to get one side to do a certain thing, and they know that'll trigger the events coming from the other side, of the apparent side, right? Mm-hmm. So they knew, in other words, they knew if we get Ukraine to join NATO, we know that'll cause Putin to invade, right? We know that'll happen. And so they did it. And to whose benefit, right? Like literally, exactly. Nobody wants this war. Nobody wants this war, and yet here it is. It's still going on. And
I mean, they've just created a meat grinder, and people from both sides are just thrown into the meat grinder. That's it.
Yep. So yeah, let's keep proving through here, and maybe we'll start to shape this a little bit more as we give a few more examples.
All right. Well, you go through with WMDs in Iraq.
Well, I mean, so we picked this one just because everybody in America nowadays is on the same page with this one. Of course, when the whole propaganda event went down with Colin Powell in the news and showing the intelligence satellite imagery of the weapons of mass destruction factories all over, yada yada yada. So that that whole story, probably half the country didn't buy it, but unfortunately half did. And really, unfortunately, is that our government does not act on the behalf of its populace. It does what it wants to do, and what it wanted to do was invade Iraq. So it made up this story. There were never any weapons found, and the whole thing went down as it went down. Of course, the Iraq people suffered 1 million civilian losses, and to what end, right? Everybody agrees that Iraq's in a worse place. Most everybody agreed, even if people agreed with the finding of these factories, most people did not agree with the United States going in and decimating the country. So the whole thing certainly wasn't in America was not backing this move, the American people. And even the experts who bought the WMD story did not buy the wholesale invasion of Iraq. And it was only the media that pumped it as this patriotic, amazing spreading democracy story. They told this story the whole time to the people, and and a certain percentage of the population brainwashed by the media bought into it. But most thinking people, rational people, never accepted it. And as it turns out, the thinking rational people were once again right. And today George Bush he goes around and makes jokes about how we never found any of those WMDs. But so I guess the point here is, go ahead.
You go ahead. No, you go ahead, and then I'll go.
The point here is that the United States is the warring arm of the world controllers, right? We are the epicenter, right? We have 200 and some odd military bases installed all around the world, as a allegedly to spread democracy, but in reality, we're the ones that are causing all the fracases, and this is no finer example in recent memory than this. And the idea here isn't is that the world, all the world goes along with it. Right? Every country, every other country in the world saw through this just as easily as most Americans saw through it. It doesn't make sense. We don't buy it. That's pretty scant evidence. It's really not enough. The UN was sending in inspectors. That Saddam Hussein was regularly letting in UN inspectors to come into these facilities and inspect them, and there was just never, never any even a shred of evidence of this, and yet we did it anyway. With the world, with the support of Europe and Africa and Australia and North America, everyone allegedly supported this, at least in the media.
Well,
so I don't know. What's your takeaway?
Well, I think it's that if you buy into this warring nations thing, then you basically believe that either Obama or Biden or Trump, George Bush, Colin Powell are like the brainiacs behind these actions. That, they wake up and have breakfast and they think about, yes, I think I will put nukes here, and I think I'll invade Iraq. Like that they're actually processing this mentally and like weighing all the logic, and they're not at all puppets, and they just literally come up with ideas to have a war and just lead millions to their death. Like frankly, it's just absurd.
Well, that if you back up enough and get a high enough level view, that's what all our wars seem to end in this way.
Right.
It's
That
a
some
bunch of
horrible
death and
leader
destruction.
came up with an idea to kill a bunch of other people, right?
Yeah, that is the story, and it's always painted as, well, it saved us from the evil nation, it saved us from the evil dictator, and that's the propaganda wrapped up in it. But that's all they have to do. In other words, all these world controllers have to do is say, this is a bad guy, and repeat it, right? Repeat a lie often enough, and it becomes the truth, right? Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, Vladimir Putin. Hamas doesn't really have an identified leader, but given enough time, if this thing would have dragged on, there eventually would have been some guy, Yasser Arafat or somebody, right, would have risen to the surface as the evil guy, and all they have to do is paint him like that, and it doesn't matter what the people think or what the thinking part of the population thinks. They just keep selling the lie, and because they don't let any of the thinking, logical, rational people that oppose their narrative onto the media, into the newspapers, they get to continue moving forward with whatever their plan was to destroy a nation, to destroy a people. And we've just done it so many times. These are just very recent examples of this exact scenario that's just been played out 1,000 times.
Okay.
It makes no sense.
Well, okay, so there you have it from the war perspective, and then we can just have a quick look at it from the COVID epidemic perspective. I mean, you've got every single institution around the world, governments, medical institutions, legal institutions, whatever, you name it, every single one of them going by the exact same playbook at the exact same time, and all in perfect harmony and perfect agreement. Media, government, medical, all saying the exact same thing at the exact same time. They'll all come out and say the same thing on the same day. And either you can believe that, the leaders of the countries sit around and independently come up with the exact same idea and tell all the people of their country, all the institutions of their country to do that. And coincidentally, it all lines up with all the other countries, even though they're normally, at friction with these countries economically, legally, politically, etc. or you can believe that there's controllers telling them independently. I mean, not independently, like telling them from above what each of them are to do. Seems pretty clear, Brad.
It's clear cut, right? The WHO, right, World Health Organization, is tentacled its way into all these nations, and so that becomes the authority, right, in all these nations when it comes to health matters. And you can't oppose it. Once it gets it embedded into your nation, it's impossible to oppose. And no clearer example of that than all the voices that opposed the mainstream COVID narrative were summarily removed from all social media platforms, like within a week. I say this often, but it's just astonishing, right? They were off of YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. All of them, their accounts were just banned instantaneously.
Right. Yeah, I forgot to mention big tech. Another coincidence that all the tech companies that have a board of directors from the establishment and not under control of the original founders, coincidentally, they all agree with the governments and medical establishment. Wow, what a coincidence!
And much worse, right? They suppress or censor any voices that disagree.
Yeah.
Right? Literally what they did.
Okie dokie. Shall we move on to the historic evidence now?
Sure. So these are some of my biggies.
Let me just introduce it. Okay. Historic evidence of world controllers. Now, this is all going to come from Brad. I'll comment when appropriate, but Brad is going to give us some historic evidence of world controllers.
I'll zip through these because each one of these could be a podcast in and of themselves, or many. But one of my biggies is a book by a guy named Anthony Sutton, and he was a British economics guy, went to Stanford. He was a member of the Hoover Institute think tank, which is a highly respected, group of intellectuals in the United States for many, many decades. But he eventually started to realize what was going on during the U.S.-Soviet Cold War, back in the 60s and 70s. And he eventually writes this pretty shocking book. It's one of the better books I've ever read, and the title speaks for itself. It's entitled "The Best Enemy Money Can Buy." And like I said, we could spend hours talking about the subject. I encourage everybody listening, if they're curious, to read this. But essentially, his point is that America, the Federal Reserve, financed the Soviet Union all through the Cold War. American corporations and companies went over and set up manufacturing plants for their military industrial complex. And, American banks were loaning the Soviet Union tons and tons of money because communism wasn't working, right? So, and he said, the Soviet Union was basically a third world country after World War II for decades. And they had no chance of competing with the rich nation of the United States. So in other words, they had to finance an enemy in order to make it seem like there was friction. There had to be an enemy, right? And I told Matt, and I think Whitten ended up watching the movie, but to me it sounded a lot like the movie Trading Places, and most of you have seen that with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, right? The two old fogey rich Randolph and Mortimer Duke make a bet, right, that they can ruin one guy's life and pick another guy up out of the gutter and make him turn him into the opposite. And that's more or less what the conclusion Sutton arrives at, is that communism was something that the world controllers wanted to make work, and it failed miserably in Germany, right? The whole Marxist theory, and they wanted to try it again. And so the Soviet Union was the unfortunate recipient of being communist. And so they split up the West and the East, and that was the $1 bet, was to see which worked better, capitalism or communism. And just to take one little step out of that, today I argue that China, which is difficult to describe as either a communist or a capitalist nation, they're really what I think they are is China. The world controllers took what they learned from this little bet of theirs, and they now mixed as much communism as they can into the capitalist framework to try to keep control of the people, but still allow some amount of creativity and business entrepreneurships to flourish. Make sense?
Yeah. Just so I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what the economics of China are. But I just wanted to mention there's this Chinese YouTuber that I saw a few times, saw a few of his videos. I think his name was Ken Sao. And he said that people in China are absolutely miserable and
Yeah,
that they're
yeah,
living in a like get or get got, like dog eat dog society, just trying to get anything that they can for themselves because there's nothing to go around. Just life sucks. I mean, I'm sure
yeah.
that's not everybody's perspective, but he made a pretty convincing case.
It's almost like again, I don't want to belabor this, but it's almost like you're given a long leash in the beginning, like you want to start up a business, right? You're free to do
Mm-hmm.
a wide variety of things that you would never be able to allow to do in a purely communist setup, right? And so it's like they're given a wide berth when they start, and then little by little the clamps start coming down on you and your business and how much money you're allowed to take in and how much you got to give the government. And they just keep basically turning the screws the bit more you flourish. That's kind of how it works in China.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we could belabor that for hours. So let's keep moving here. So let's jump over. Bretton Woods is another one of my big examples of world controllers. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, again, you could spend weeks talking about this. But essentially, what happened was the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference is what Bretton Woods was a bunch of rich banker guys and political leaders got together in New Hampshire, America, of all places, over the weekend, and they decided just unilaterally and without any, dealings with other nations. This is, by the way, this is while World War II is still going on, right? It's not even close to over in 1944, and they just decided that the new world reserve currency was going to be the American dollar, and that was it. There was no votes. There was no taking it back to your country to see if your country was going to get on board. They just decided it. And shortly thereafter, they pegged every other nation's currency to the U.S. dollar, and you never read or see or hear anything about anybody fighting it, which is astonishing, right? And to me, that's
Yeah,
a
you would
clear
think
example.
most nations would resist. Like if it's in civilization and it's country versus country, then why would you want that? You'd be like, no way,
Right?
no
Yeah,
way.
just raise
That'll
your
make the United States way more ahead of us. We will not win.
exactly.
Let's
Just
impose.
every national president, prime minister should have raised his hand and said, "Nah, we'd like to be the world reserve currency," right? Like, we're not going to agree to this. We want to do it, and like none of that happened. They just decided it. It was done. It was over, and there was nothing anybody could do about it. The end.
Mhm.
So anyway, that to me, that if that's not an example of world controllers, you say, "Oh, that's not controlling nations. That's just controlling the financials and the monies." And it's like, you got to remember that old Amschel Rothschild quote, which I guess it's sketchy whether he actually said it or not, but it's actually it makes perfect sense. And it was the quote where he says, "I care not who makes the laws of the nation as long as I control the money." Right? Whether or
Mhm.
not he said that, or I'm sure that's the sentiment of the international bankers, and they were more than happy to make basically the world power, the central core of the world powers was in Britain, right, for 500 years. And when sea superiority and landmass no longer mattered, they moved over to the United States, and that's they came from Rome, and they went to London, and then they came to Washington D.C. That's pretty much how they've
All right.
moved. That's like their
So they're
headquarters,
just like, let's hang out at the Pentagon now. It's better over there.
right? So anyway, we got to keep moving. So my other example, well, this is quickie. Rudolf Steiner. He just here his talks about World War One, and to summarize very nicely, he said that the entirety of World War One was basically orchestrated by Freemasons, Freemasonic lodges around Europe that knew how to foment irritation and scuttles and get nations to fight one another, and that's precisely what they did. And he said it was actually, and we'll talk about this in the end, but he said it was a form of karmic discharge from a period of time that most people have been led to believe is fake, which is that Atlantean times, and there were many wars at the end of that civilization. And he said World War One was a big karmic discharge for the Atlantean wars. Interesting, huh?
Well, I can't claim any knowledge over that topic, but
Yep.
if he says so.
interesting, right? And then, obviously we'll get into the Freemasons in a little bit here and their how they play a role in this world controller groups. But all right, so on to Benjamin Friedman. Friedman, one of my favorite speeches ever, 1961 speech did in Washington D.C. And quickly, right, he went through the absurdity of all the events of World War I. And so, first he mentions that Germany wasn't a country until 1871. Right? They were just a bunch of fiefdoms. I believe there were about 25 independent nation states, right, that made up what now we call Germany. And they formed together, and almost immediately, right, within a couple decades, they became this enormous economic powerhouse, and they were just destroying France and England. I mean, just absolutely wiping them out, like beating them in every aspect of trade, economics, products, superior technology, the whole nine yards. And England and France didn't know what to do about it. And so they wanted to start a war to knock this upstart nation down. And Friedman basically says there's absolutely no good reason why World War I happened. So this is the example he gives. Obviously, Steiner's is a bit deeper and debatable, but he points this out, and then he says, of course, in 1916, the Zionists make a deal with England, and they're losing horribly to this upstart Germany, by the way, because they have superior technology and superior military, and they've now been approached, I think, 3 times by Germany to sign a peace agreement, and Germany doesn't want to fight anymore, but England and France don't want to give up, and so they make a deal with Lord Rothschild. It's called the Balfour Agreement. And it's a very simple agreement, and this, of course, is that if the Zionists propagandize the Americans into coming into the war on the side of England and France, right? Which at the time, by the way, America was 90% in favor of the Germans, if you can believe that, during World War I. So in a matter of 3 months, this was done. But in return for them coaxing America to come into the war, which made no sense why America would get into the war, by the way. They asked the British to go take this piece of land called Palestine, which the British wasn't a British territory. The British didn't own it, right? It was its own place. But the Zionists wanted this, the Holy Land, for themselves, and so they said, "We'll trick the Americans into joining you and winning World War I if you give us Palestine." That's the Balfour Agreement, and of course, we get the Israeli state eventually. That's the end result of that little handshake deal they made. So it's just a clear example of who the world controllers are, like who pulled the strings, who made this deal, who made all these things happen. Freemasons, Zionists, Jesuits, as I'll talk about, but these are some of the examples of people that are really moving action. It's not the presidents and the prime ministers. It's these, as I'll say next, it's the hidden hands. And we'll talk about it. We did a whole podcast on the hidden hand dialogue, and one of the things, some of the things that he said in that was, we control all institutions around the world. This hidden group of Luciferians, right? And he also said, we are born leaders, so we're born to lead. So think about that a little bit, and you'll see how the people that are at the top of the heap when it comes to leadership, all are cut from this cloth, born to do this. Born to violate free will, in effect. Yeah?
Sure. Yeah. I think the Balfour Agreement one is really good evidence because it's just so obvious.
Astonishing.
You literally got an agreement between a nation and a non-nation entity to create a nation in another nation.
Well, yeah. Technically,
right.
Technically, it was just called Palestine. It wasn't recognized by the UN, but it wasn't like a British territory,
about recognition.
Right?
I mean,
but yeah.
Who cares about that? But that's whether you agree on the word nation or anything like that. Like, this is an activity that happened above nations.
Completely, right? Like they could have asked for the British Virgin Islands, right? Or they could have asked for Australia or something, right? Like those were like British territories, effectively, right? Like Britain owned those places, more or less, right? But now they said, we want this land that that's not even yours. We want you to go take it for us.
Yeah. Just genocide a little group of people over here and give us that, right?
Right. Here we are today. Literally, as we're recording this, today was the day of the historic, amazing peace agreement between Israel and Hamas. So you can see over 100 years later, there's still a conflict going on because of this little deal that was made in 1960.
Okie dokie.
How about that?
So now we'll go on to the topic where we actually, identify who potentially are these world controllers. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do it. The international clique. United we stand, divided we fall. But who's doing the dividing? In our previous video, we broke the spell of warring nations. It's actually a few videos back, and gave evidence of there being world controllers. Now, let's explore the nature of these world controllers. So we suggest that there is a small group of entities and people who have been pulling the levers and strings since time immemorial to generate chaos. They've remained undetected by and large. You want to introduce the most readily identifiable groups, Brad?
Yep, there's three that I always point out, and before I say this, I want to say that 99% of people who identify with being a member or a believer in these groups or these movements are not involved. And so that's 99%. So there are a lot of Freemasons, Jesuits, and Zionists in the world that have no involvement in any of this. However, within these organizations, there are degrees of power and influence, and you rise through the degrees and the levels of these institutions. You eventually get to a point where you can get to a place of what I call belief shaping or leading or manipulating things in a certain direction. And it's that 1% hidden within these groups, just like the 1% in our major institutions at the very, very tippy top that are actually making things happen. So these are the three groups: the Freemasons. And again, everybody knows a Freemason. My grandfather was a Freemason. A guy that lives a couple doors down from me, I know, was a Freemason. And people join this group to network, right? It's like a business networking type of thing, right? And it is financially astute to do that. And they go down to the lodge on Saturday nights and have some beers and play some pool or whatever they do, and that's the whole life. Otherwise, they live a normal life and they run a dry cleaning or a restaurant or something, right? But that's what members of Freemasonry, 99%, are doing. They're not involved in any of this. Same thing with the Jesuits. Most of them are out, spreading the word of Jesus and the Catholic religion and on and on and on. They're not involved at the very highest levels. But the Freemasons are primarily involved in law and order. That's the main area that they're in. So the Fraternal Order of Police. The legal system is 100% started and run by the Freemasons out of the city of London. Inns of the court, and I mean, the legal system is a tremendous structure of power. I really call it the matrix within the matrix, and that's all Freemasonic. And so, judges, attorneys come from that ilk. If you go back, like not even 60, 70 years, almost every judge and attorney was a Freemason that long ago. I mean, it's changed tremendously recently, but that's the way it was for the first 50 or 60 years of the legal system here in America. The Jesuits are involved in education and religion.
If I can just mention really quick.
Please.
I discovered just recently that the logo for the Australian police is the Freemasonic Lodge floor. I was just looking at it. It's like this checkered thing. And I was like, what is that? I was like, is that the Freemason floor? And I looked it up, did some research, and it legitimately was created by a Freemason in Scotland. I think it's also the symbol for over there. Maybe not still, but it was at the time. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember the name of the guy, but it was either Percy something or something Percy. Probably his first name was Percy. Freemason. And he was being congratulated in the lodge paper for getting their symbol in as the symbol for the police.
Yeah.
So next time you're speaking to the Australian police, you can say, how can I help my local Freemasons?
As I understand it, the police in Australia are some of the least amenable to the public. But I've never been there, so I can't speak for myself. But that's what I hear.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Anyway, so yeah, the Jesuits, like I said, education and religion. And what people don't realize is that the Jesuits, they're like behind the Big Bang Theory and Einsteinism, and as well as the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses and Islam. I mean, they're literally involved in starting up all these opposing or different religions. So they're not just Catholics. They're materialists and they're Jehovah's Witnesses, right? There are a lot of different things they're involved in. So, they corrupted Japan and Buddhism many 150 years ago. So there's a lot that they're involved in, and they've been thrown out of a lot of places. And just in the Zionists, of course, people mistakenly say Jews, but it's really this Zionist movement that at the upper echelons, not the people who believe in an Israeli state, right? And say I'm a Zionist. I'm talking about the high 1% that are in banking and media, are the main areas that the Zionists operate in, and they obviously are in control of a lot of propaganda and our entire financial system. So you add up law and order, education and religion, banking and media, and you've just about covered, right? Like all our major institutions are covered, and these are all very, very deeply managed by these three groups.
Mm.
Unbeknownst to most average person.
Why don't you take government and I'll mention corporations?
Well, yeah, so I'd say the government is the largest criminal syndicate, mafia, through which this power and control is expressed. And obviously, once again, it's not your average everyday government worker down at the post office or over at the welfare office or the food stamp line, right? None of those people, right? It's the administrative state that surrounds government, right? And so everybody can easily point to the CIA and the FBI and the DOJ today as all these unconstitutional organizations are the where the levers are pulled, and these are the groups that make things happen at least in the United States government. Yeah.
Sure. Government.
Oh, yeah. And let me just make one last comment.
Criminal syndicate mafia. It's a big racket.
Let me make another thing clear, because it's not, excuse me, to a lot of people, is that the deep state, which is a very common phrase people use today, it isn't the American deep state or the Australian deep state. It's one deep state that operates in conjunction and in tandem in every nation with each other. And if you do, a lot of guys have done some deep dives on intelligence agencies, and they suggest that, the British MI5 and MI6 are the progenitor of KGB and the CIA and the OSS and the Mossad, and they all work together. It's one unit, and it isn't like the Mossad and the CIA and MI6 are battling each other for intelligence. They're each collecting intelligence for each other that they share. And they're the progenitors of many, many, many problems in the world. Anyway, keep going.
Well, I'm sure the intelligence agencies works just like the Freemasons, Jesuits, and Zionists, where if you get in at the lower levels, you're doing stuff like you would think. But I'm sure that once you get up to the absolute highest levels, you're, a whole different ballgame.
That's right.
If I can mention corporations.
Go ahead.
Corporations is a good one. Because, if you want to take your company public, then you need to, in the legal system, when I say take it public, I mean, not just independently go out and get investment from the public. I mean, inside the legal system, by their regulations, you have to take on a board of directors. And this board of directors is a bunch of people who are also board of directors for another bunch of companies. So it's a big incestual thing where the establishment inside this finance, government, regulation sector deploys these controlling minions to control the asset that a founder has developed. So essentially you've got, the establishment controlling all the major corporations via the board of directors. They just put all their cronies at the top of the corporations, and they just control any public corporation. They have way more power than the founder.
Right. Some people call that fascism, by the way. And it's been pointed out innumerable times, just to make the link between the government and the corporations, that there are all these massive, powerful corporations around the world, right? And there's a revolving door between government officials and boards of directors and C level executives, that there's a revolving door between the two, right? They're they're the president of Halliburton for 10 years, and then they're the vice president of the United States for 8 years, and then they're back to being on the board of directors of Halliburton for 10 years, right? So
Right. It seems like whichever route or avenue you take to get to the top of one of the sectors, the factions, then you're in the main thing, and then you can jump and be the controlling any sort of sector from there.
That's right. You're in the club, as George Carlin would say.
Yeah, and we ain't in it.
100%. Thankfully.
Okie dokie. And we'll just mention that, like, we could go on a big rant about media. We could do the same for academia. We could do medicine. We could do legal system. It's going to be the same everywhere, right? At the highest levels of this stuff, you only get there if you jump through all the hoops and eventually just like confine your intentions to exactly what people at the highest levels want you to do.
Right. And so the illusion, right, that we have been placed up under is that these institutions, right, around the world have all arrived at the truth. And that's why there's no contradiction or controversy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
That's funny.
Whatever it is. Yeah. So that's just a giant illusion. Right? The fact is that none of them are telling the truth. They're all lying. And it's just a matter of how unbrainwashed you get yourself to see through what's very obvious. And once again, that dispels the idea that, Australian medical system or their, universities are independent of American or British universities or medical institutions, right? They're all marching in lockstep to the same propaganda and lies.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Right. If I can just restate what you said just for medicine, it's like all the medical groups of each country, all through the power of science, which they're so good at, better at science than people who aren't part of their establishment. They all arrived at the wonderful scientific truth, which happens to be the same scientific truth that, all the other countries arrived at. Most people think that I'm like anti-science when I say that. I'm very pro-science, but I think that they're not doing science. I think that they're doing propaganda and lies.
Yeah. Here's a fun little experiment. Ask an AI sometime to find a scientific paper that follows the scientific method, which to me is the definition of science, right? It follows the method called the scientific method, and AI can't find any.
Wow.
So none of them are doing science. I've restricted my research to viruses and cancer research and all these other things. Like, show me where they use the scientific method from beginning to end, and nothing. There's nothing out there, because it can't be, because what they're saying isn't true. Anyway, we got to keep.
That would be a really good podcast if I can just mention real quickly. That'd be fantastic, because a lot of people argue to me, Matt, who are you to argue against all these people who used the wonderful scientific method to create this wonderful world? Yeah. I'm like, what? I'm well familiar with the scientific method, so it'd be great if we did a podcast on just that topic, like the scientific method and how it's used in the establishment.
We'll put it on the list. But it's a good one.
Shall we? Yeah, I think we will. Shall we go on to the next topic?
Proceed.
Okay. So here it is. How can it be that there are controllers of the world? So before we go into answers on this topic, we want to acknowledge something. We've written this statement. It defies belief to think that only people with bad intentions ascend to the most powerful positions in humanity, because most people are mostly good. So we are completely aware that it sounds like an absurdity that we would be putting forward that there's world controllers who have a negative intention for humanity, because we fully recognize that just you meet regular people and they're good, right? So it seems like an absurdity. However, there's nuance to this point. Do you want to take us into that, Brad?
Right. Yeah. That point can't be made strongly enough, right? Is that, the 99% are good. There's only a small little fraction of, bad intentioned evil people out there. And so you think about it, like, how is it that the good intentioned, good people don't ascend to some tops of some of these institutions and, blow up the deception, right? That's a good question. It's a rational question. And here are a couple of practical answers that we've come up with. First of all,
Yeah,
that it's
just to be
deliberate.
clear, we've got practical answers and then we've got higher answers. So just be ready for that.
Right, zingers. So practically speaking, right, is that it's the very deliberate. So the all that's needed is to get a certain type of person installed as the CEO or president or board of director leaders into these organizations. So you don't need many, right? You just need a few, and then they maintain who can ascend within that institutional organization accordingly. So through all different kinds of secret societies, vetting through the groups we mentioned, vetting through compromise, blackmail, corrupt activities, right? That's how they find these people that they push up the ranks. So
And
that's
if I can
how
just
it's
add, like I
designed.
said, with corporations, you someone doesn't have to ascend to the top of your corporation. Once you go public, you have a board of directors placed in control of your company, and they're just put there, chosen by the regulatory body. Okay.
That's right. And there's all kinds of pressure, blackmail, compromise, threats. There's a whole bunch of things that are going on at these highest levels. There's a million Hollywood movies that we've all seen along these lines. So anyway, that's one way. Another thing to take note of is that this has been pretty clearly explained in a wide variety of different spiritual resources that I've studied over the years. Is that and this is backed up by research into the cabal or the controllers, whatever the bloodlines, whatever you want to call them, is that a child that's raised without love or doesn't feel loved after a certain age, right? They sort of shut down or put an armor around their hearts, if you will, and they can no longer let love in. It's a very strange phenomena, but this is what happens, and so they become driven to seek artificial love, which is, of course, public notoriety and respect from your employees and that kind of thing, and this gives them what's missing in their lives, which is a real sense of love. And it's been noted by several of the conspiracy cabal bloodline researchers over the years that this is how the cabal raise their children. That this is what it's not reform schools, but they send their kids away to school, out of the house, into these organizations where the kids live, in these dormitories, and the parents aren't around, and they're raised in such a way, treated fairly poorly, and those children become effectively born leaders, as Hidden Hand said. That makes sense?
Right. So yeah, like we don't really have that in Australia. Or maybe we do, but not to a large extent. But like I see on sitcoms and other TV shows that the kid goes off to boarding school. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Boarding school, right? Right. They have them going to boarding schools in first, second, third grade, kind of a thing.
Yeah, right. It's just like away from your parents. Like you'd feel terrible, right?
Yep. And that's how they get raised. And so falling back to Hidden Hands, we're born leaders, right? This basically treating a child in that way produces a leader, because everybody
Yeah.
needs that sense of love. And since they can't get it anymore from family or from spouses or anything, they can't feel it. They've shut that part of them down. They have to feel it from this sense of power over others.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great sitcom. I'm just going to toss this in here real quick. It was on Fox, but back in the 1990s in America, and it was just a great premise, and it just didn't fly. But the premise was this mother had this child, and she left it and ran away, and some pretty uncaring people, and the people didn't really want the baby either, but they decided to raise it, and they kind of set this playpen up in this room with a television set that was on 24 hours a day, and they just basically fed the kid, and the only interaction the kid got was with the television. And so, I'd watched all these television programs about human behavior, soap operas, just became this scheming, manipulative adult, and he thought that this is the way the world worked, and went about his life in such a way. So anyway, it didn't last long, but it's kids are sponges, and kids, that those first 10 years really inform how the adult is going to be, how it's going to behave. So it's not as complicated as it sounds. Anyway, that was reason number 2. Practical reason number 3 is that even a good-intentioned, well-intentioned, kind, loving person who thinks they're trying to do well and right by humanity, who goes into politics or seeks to rise in one of these institutions, over time, they begin to violate people's free will, not directly, but indirectly by passing laws and by making, tough decisions and so forth. So they're effectively going against the second basic law of the universe, which is free will. They're violating free will. And so this automatically turns them towards the dark side. As soon as you want to tell other people what they can and can't do, you're violating their free will, and that leans your consciousness towards the dark side. So over time, in this role of leadership, let's just say that their consciousness is dimmed and debauched, and they become less and less of who they were and what their original intentions were when they set out. Make sense?
Oh, yeah. And, this violation of free will thing, it's so common. Like, your average person, like, to some extent, violates other people's free will, like, just automatically. It seems like there's like a propaganda campaign, probably through like the Hollywood kind of avenue, about how people act, that just violating people's free will is just normal. Just go for it. Doesn't matter.
It's sold to us as normal, 100%.
So I mean, then you've got the foundations for like a hierarchy in which people are just stomping all over other people to get to the top. So it creates the right kind of pathway for someone extremely dark to come out at the top.
Right. If you take all this practical stuff and bundle it up into a nice, neat package, what you're left with is that the most ruthless and manipulative people, are the ones who rise and ascend in these hierarchical structures.
Mm.
Right? Those are the qualities required. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the entire system is set up to only be reachable by that kind of person.
That's right. It is. I mean, if you're a patsy, if you're a walkover, you're never going to get anywhere near these echelons of power.
Oh yeah, I was always one of those people. I didn't work in the workforce for a long time, but like I could tell that it was the people that would like speak really loud and get their opinion out and try to show everybody that they're the one with the right opinion, that are clearly being pushed up for promotion and stuff. Whereas I would just sit there and be like, well, I'm not sure if I'm completely correct about this, so I probably won't say anything. Right.
Right. I often say the best leaders, misleaders, I call them, but let's say if we have to have them, right, the best ones would be the ones who don't want the job. Like you force them to be president of the United States for 4 years. Anyway, let's keep moving. So the higher answers,
all right. Higher answers. This is your territory, Brad, so take it away.
All right. So this gets into areas where, people are less and less familiar with, but we got to talk about them because it's really important. And one of them, the biggie, is that why is this all happening? What's going on here? How could this be? And how do we get out of this? And a really nice, clean answer is that what's going on here is that these rulers and leaders and high-powered people are actually setting up the conditions for us to discharge our karma. This is what a lot of the higher spiritual teachers and channels talk about, is that they are in these positions to bring out what's inside of us that needs to be cleared out, to purify us, in effect. Make sense?
Yeah, I'll even throw back at you the same question that I asked Brad when we're preparing this material, because first when I heard that, I was like, I kind of get it, but what does that mean? So the question I asked was, well, how would you say that they're enabling me to discharge my karma?
Right. So that's such the vast answer I could give, and I'm not sure what I mentioned earlier, but right, they have created the social and cultural conditions, right, by which most people who are operating comfortably within the social framework to release the anger, to get in the fights, to get in the marital spats, to get in the disagreements and controversies with their boss and their fellow employees and their friends and neighbors, right? Like there's all these conditions are set up to basically draw out our fear and judgment. See how that kind of works?
Mm-hmm. So you're saying, it seems like you're suggesting that the karma is fear and judgment and resistance that has been taken on but not expressed, and they're
That's right.
creating conditions, reasons to express it. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Well, so you have to, of course, if you buy into karma, which I do wholeheartedly, you have to buy into reincarnation. And the idea, of course, is that we've lived hundreds, if not hundreds, thousands of lifetimes. And so we have built up a karmic backlog. And part of our reincarnating and into a new body is to discharge the karma. So in other words, in the very beginning, you were pure, loving, neutral, perfect energy. Over time, right, you started to put out less than that type of energy, and that, some form of fear or judgment, basically. And the first law is that, law of karma, law of rebound, law of the circle, law of cause and effect, whatever you want to call it. But the essence of it is that the creator must experience its own creations. So that energy that you've put out, right, that, in other words, you've despoiled or misqualified the pure, perfect, loving God energy, and you've changed it. And so in order to get back to balance or neutral, you have to experience that energy to discharge it. Does that make sense?
If I can clarify one point, like, say I get drawn into some vicious argument and I'm like yelling and screaming, right? To me, like, I would initially think that the yelling and the screaming is the bad thing that's going to give me karma. But it seems that you're saying that that's the discharging of the karma. Am I correct?
That's correct. You're in that moment, you're discharging it. So you gotta move through it and feel it. But you're creating more of it when you go, leave that situation and sit around resenting that and thinking of ways to get back at the person and revenge, and you maintain anger about it for a week or a month or a year, that kind of thing. That's how you're creating new karmic energy for yourself. So
right.
It's one thing to experience it at the moment.
Once you've repressed it and held onto it, there is nothing you can do other than discharge it.
That's right.
It's going to happen one way or another. And you're suggesting,
that's right.
If I can just finish, please. You're suggesting that the controllers are creating conditions that enable that discharge more frequently or quickly or more efficiently or somehow better than otherwise would occur without them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and the act of repressing the truth, censoring the truth, or keeping the information that would help us all free ourselves, right, from us recreating this own karmic energy that we wish we didn't have to experience, right, would end if they would just tell us the truth. We'd instantly stop producing more karma. Not instant, you know what I mean, instantly. Over the course of a few years, right, everyone will realize what's really going on.
And why do you suppose they don't tell us the truth such that we can keep, such that we can stop producing more karma, seeing as we've got so much to discharge?
Well, it seems to be heightening, right? So there seems to be accelerating. So it looks to me like it is coming to an end, in some not too distant future, 10, 20, 30 years maybe. So we're starting to peak really, really high right now. But
I guess that doesn't really answer the question though. Just to be clear, like, why do you suppose they would want us to continue accumulating karma at all?
Well, the accumulation is your misunderstanding of how things work, right? So
maybe I got that wrong. So you're not saying that.
If you, and we'll get down to this question, which is a little bit down, you have to reach this point where you say there's got to be a better way. But until you realize, right, that you're the source of your bad feelings and bad interactions and bad energies, right? if you continue blaming people outside of you, right, you are going to continue to generate more karma.
Mm.
And
Okay, so you're suggesting
society,
we independently create the karma in the first place, and they can create conditions for us to discharge it. Is that clear?
right? The conditions are our education and our media and our religious upbringings, right? All these things create the framework for having these interactions that discharge karma.
Hmm. Okay.
Does that make sense? I don't know if I
Well,
got
it
it, but
makes sense the way you put it. It's pretty extreme. Yeah.
right? Like if they would just tell us the truth, right? Then everything would change rapidly.
But the karma wouldn't be discharged.
Well, yeah, then you have to find a different way. It would just, the dynamics of human life would change so dramatically that it's hard to
Right.
imagine, right? So
Yeah.
clearly, right, this whole and this timeline split thing we've talked about a few times, but I'll just briefly touch on it. But that's the idea, is that there's a certain percentage of the population that is seeing through, right, seeing through the lies, and there's a certain percentage that can't see them. I mean, you can sit down and spend a year explaining all of this in great detail to them, and they're going to walk away like you're nuts, you're crazy. So there's something that's preventing a certain percentage of the population from recognizing what's happening. It's not intelligence, right? It's not cognitive dissonance. It's not even the Nathaniel Branden thing, the metaphysical worthlessness thing. It's something even deeper that they still have. They still need to have 100 more fights with their wife, or they still need to swear under their breath at their boss for another couple of years. And it's just that's what they need to alleviate the bad karma that they've emanated in this lifetime and in previous lifetimes. Makes sense?
So someone who doesn't believe in viruses still needs to blame other people for getting them sick by transmission of a virus.
Yeah, even if they wipe out virus, then it's got to be a toxin of some sort, right? Or an evil 5G radiation or something, right? It has to be, right? That's so.
And that is where their mind goes to. They're like, "Well, give me something else." Like, "Well, if you're not saying the virus caused it, well, give me something else that's causing me this problem."
It's all victim consciousness. Anything but creator consciousness. Anything will work, but that. And like I said, it's not an intellectual process that gets them to the right answer. It's something deeper. So if they still need to discharge the karma, they just can't hear it.
Interesting. Period. Do you want to be clear on these positive energies versus negative energies?
Well, sure.
Identifying them?
There comes a point, right? I guess this is my last bullet, but I'm going to say it now, is that where people reach a point where they're like, there's got to be a better way. I can't keep fighting with my wife this way. I can't keep arguing with my boss. I can't stay in this job. I can't, you know what I mean? There's just like, it's got to be a better way. It doesn't matter who we elect for president. The problems are still the same and nothing ever gets fixed, right? So it's kind of that moment when people realize the better way, right, isn't to fix the what's going on outside. That's not the better way. The better way is to fix what's going on inside. So it's a movement out of resistance, right? Which you can call that conditional love, right? So most people are in a state of, if only this group of people would stop doing what they're doing, or we eliminate this race or tribe or group, then I'd be happy, right? Just fix what's going on out there and I'll be happy. And it's when the recognition that that's never going to happen and it's not going to work, but they realize that they'd rather be happy, that they shift into the allowance and acceptance energies. And that's the unconditional love. And that's where, like, it is what it is. And there's nothing I can do about it. All I can really do is not continue to put out these energies that don't feel good. So that is the effective shift out of the matrix or the trap that we have been indoctrinated into believing in. Yeah?
I think I could mention 2 other podcasts that relate to that. We have got one called Victim Mentality, and we've got one called What is the Matrix?
Yeah, and How to Fix the World.
And How to
Not
Fix
too
the
bad
World.
Either.
And I suppose that parlays into what we want to say here, the Mind Blown Zone solutions. You want me to read that out?
Yeah, go for it.
Rather than bringing to justice or imprisoning or hanging all the bad guys. That's not the answer. There are billions of others ready to take their place. The only solution is to wake up to the truth. The truth is, well, this is a big one. Maybe you get to say this one. This is yours, Brad. You can lay it out.
Okay.
I don't feel
All
right
right.
taking it from you.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me. So it just says, we just said that our institutions are a reflection of all the resistance energies that humanity emanates. So they're not the cause, right? It's like, well, the evil government and the awful doctors or whatever, right? They're not the cause. They're the reflection of what we put out and believe. That's the key idea to understand, is that once enough people stop the blaming and shaming and, revenge and vengeance and justice, once that subsides, then so too the institutions will come to reflect the dominant mass energies. What do you think about that? A little kick in the pants, huh?
Let me throw a question at you.
Mhm.
Just a fairly abstract question. Is anything anybody's fault?
Oh boy, that's it. Fault and blame are two words that I'm not going to talk about today. Those are
Okay.
tricky subjects, Matt. Because good
I
question,
thought it was a
tricky
good
subject.
question.
Good question.
Another
It's a
phrasing of
tricky
the question
subject.
would be, is anybody to blame for anything?
Right. I mean, all I'll
Another
say
time,
is,
eh?
at the below 400 on the Hawkins scale of consciousness, right, which is 95% of humanity, the answer is yes and yes. There are plenty of people are at fault, and there's plenty of people to blame. Above the 400 level, your perspective shifts. How's that?
I
We'll
agree
leave it
with
at
that.
that.
I've experienced the shift. Like when someone else is asking me, well, are you blaming me? Or I'm like, I am not blaming anybody. I don't care about these words blame. I don't care if I'm to blame. I don't care if you're to blame. I care that this is what we're currently in. And I just think if we just do this, like, I'm not saying that my solution's perfect. I'm not saying I've reached the highest suggestion, but like, let's just drop the blame.
Yeah, it's one of my three big nasties, right? Blame, complain, and worry. Those are my three biggies. And anyway, that's another subject for another day. But yeah, that's a hard one, and it's a complicated, difficult answer, especially it depends on the level of consciousness of who you're talking to. So, are
Alrighty.
we wrapping up here, or
We,
we're not doing the rest of this, right?
oh yeah. We're good to finish. So I would say, you want further information? We've listed a few podcasts in here. There's also one called The Hidden Hand Drop from 2008. And the ultimate destination is, of course, Take Your Power Back, which is available on our website. If you go to themindblowenzone.com/courses, or just click courses at the top right, you're going to get access to the course that rips out all the blame, complain, and worry and other negative things and resistance from your life, and lets in the positive
Yeah.
energies.
Oh yeah, and I forgot Brad's simple 3-step solution. I just got to throw it in here. We didn't write it down, but so if this podcast resonates with you at all, right, then you've gained some awareness, right? There's a new perspective for most people. They have never thought about things this way. So you've gained some awareness. So now you can go off and you can research some of the things we brought up, right? You can read the Sutton book. You can watch the Benjamin Friedman video. You can, a lot of topics we brought up. So that's gaining some awareness, right? So now you see things a different way. But you can also spread your awareness. Hey, this is an interesting podcast. These guys talked about something I'd never heard of. Or you can share it with people and say, ask them for their opinion and so forth. And these are the two of the biggest steps that you can take to ending what appears to be these tyrannical, fraudulent, deceptive institutions that are around us. Of course, the final step is to withdraw your participation in these things as much as you can, right? Like, not everything all at once, but stop watching the news and the media. Stop believing that any media narrative, any mainstream narrative that's going on. You got to look into it a little bit deeper, and your withdrawal in the participation in the mainstream argument allows you then to see things in a different light and form some more rational conclusions. Yeah?
Right on.
Anyway, there it is. There's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, I think that nails it. So thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, Brad, for sharing all this wonderful information. And I'll see you next time on the podcast.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it, Matt. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.